He's Jeff.
And he's Michael.
And that's totally corny.
It's corny, but it never gets old, in my opinion.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody that's coming in. Yeah, it never gets old. It is corny, but corny is good. Corny can be everlasting.
There you go.
Yeah, I had the countdown 17, 18, like, surprise, you don't have to wait. Okay. Yeah. Before we get into this, there's something that's been on my mind that's been I've been very, very curious about. Something
Okay.
I've been meaning to ask you, wanting to ask you, no better time than the present. Last time we saw each other, I'm very curious about the conversation in the ride home in the car between you and your wife and your two daughters.
Anything in specific? Because one, it was warm out that day. It was an odd event. I will say it that way. It's like there was this.
Dad, what are you taking us to?
Not exactly. Well, it's like there's this odd juxtaposition because I know you're a Christian, and I know what you're doing with the project here and everything. But then just kind of trying to figure out what else is going on there. I mean, I've got a friend from RTB, Ross Hoagland, that I know shows up. I'm like, hey, I didn't expect to see you. And not entirely sure where the love shaman is and what all's going on there. It was just an interesting, what's going on? How do we do with that? I mean, it was an interesting, I enjoyed the morning, and it was fun to come over there. It's good to see you and your family, see what's going on. Like I said, our conversation ranged everywhere. So
I'm more concerned with your daughters. Like, Dad, who are you friends with?
No, that actually never came up. I mean, we were just sitting there talking. It's like, what is it that was going on here, and how do we think about and how do we process all that? And it was that was not the concern. It was more, like I said, we're just trying to wrap our heads around what is it that we'd heard and how does that all fit together. And so I don't know how you do things, but in my mind, when I'm listening to stuff, I'm always trying to ask, okay, what do I do with this? Is this just something fun to be entertained by and then I'll forget about it? Is this something that, there's something deeper to learn? And it takes me a while to put the context of what I'm hearing so that I can learn how to listen well. And that's kind of where my kids and my family, my wife were. So
great. Well, thank you for coming. This is the first time we've spoken since then. And for everybody in the chat, in the comment section, or that's listening, what we're referring to is Jeff came to the event that I had on November 11th, and it's the soft launch of the public facing side of the project. I'm telling the world now. It's kind of the launch of the grassroots. I have an event tomorrow. Actually, I'm going to Fresno tomorrow. There's a huge Armenian population in Fresno, and I don't know how many people are going to show up. It's a similar thing. It's kind of a last minute, even though this one I had gave people a couple weeks notice, but I'm not in Fresno. I don't know people in Fresno. I got a few contacts there. So I'm going to show it, and it's going to be at a cemetery again. But this is Soghomon Tehlirian's burial plot. It's a monument. It's a huge monument. So it's a logical, to be there is logical. But I'm heading up there in the morning, and I'll head back in the evening. It's a 3.5 hour drive to Fresno and back.
Right, it is, yeah.
But I'll be hanging out with some Armenians tomorrow. All right. There. That's context for everybody. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. I will say two things that came up. It was hard to figure out the connection between that fellow and Soghomon Tehlirian in my mind. And the other one is like, we're driving in and I'm like, where's Michael? And then I realized, oh yeah, you're the dude with the long hair. And so
yeah, it's been growing.
I got to ask, is there, I'm gathering there's a reason for that, or is this just, hey, I'm going to try this for a while?
Well, yes and yes.
Okay.
I had long hair in high school, and then there was another period I had long hair, and it's not the longest it's ever been. In high school, it's the longest it's ever been. So one of the reasons is the place I always get my hair cut shut down. They went out of business. So businesses have suffered of late for various reasons.
Yes.
And then I've been kind of advised by producer Gina not to say this too much, but I'm going to say it again. There's with the project that I'm working on, as things move forward, there's another project coming after this
Mm.
that I'm not going to say anymore, but would require me having long hair.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right.
So
I gathered there was a reason. I was just
yeah,
this is the
yeah,
first. It was noticeable. I'm like, oh wow, he looks really different than I expect.
yeah. Yeah, we don't see each other. I mean, sometimes wearing a hat in here and everything, but
Right.
the
Right.
hair is getting long. Definitely. All right, so, all right, people, we're gonna get to our topic. All right,
Okay.
enough of Jeff and Mike just getting caught up. All right, so you approved this topic.
Mhm.
Uh, I imagine this question has been posed to you as an astrophysicist. I imagine it's been posed to you at least once or twice in your life. Have somebody asked you what's that thing that the wise men were following? How could they find Jesus?
It is. Well, I mean, it's kind of one of the natural places where scripture seems to connect with astronomy. And so I can't say I've had a lot of people, oh, I just want to know what the star is.
Yeah.
But I have actually kind of had dabblings with this really back to right after I got out of graduate school. And so when I was in Iowa, or after I finished graduate school, I taught for a year at Loras College in Dubuque. And one of the planetarium shows that I did was on the Star of Bethlehem and one of the ideas that's out there of what it might be. And so, I find the idea intriguing. It's like, what astronomically was going on there? It's not the sort of thing that I spend much time, stay up late at night. And I think there are probably a number of options that could work. So it's not like I think we can pin it down and say, oh, this is what it was. But yeah, it's,
Well, I'm all ears.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what scripture says about the star. So,
Such as,
well, so I can't, well, I'm just curious. When you hear about the star, when you think about the Star of Bethlehem in a church context, what are you thinking is up in the sky?
So when I approach scripture, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I try to rule out the supernatural as often as possible, right? Like anytime there's a naturalistic explanation, yeah, there are events in scripture that are absolutely miracles. Like the scripture's full of miracles. And
Mhm.
for example, like I don't think the parting of the Red Sea was a sudden horizontal tornado that laid down. I mean, that's probably what was actually used, but I don't think it was a natural event that was recurring
Yeah.
or anything. The parting of the Red Sea, that God did something very special there.
Mhm.
So maybe that's the case here. And I honestly, I don't know. I in preparation for this, I just read through a couple of theories, and so I'm like, oh, I see why these would or would not make sense. But I don't.
Yeah, well, and part of why I asked that is that, what, I did Awana for a long time, and one of the things I would do is, okay, here, a Christmas quiz. And so I'd put various things up in there because I remember getting suckered or fooled back when I was in college, talking about who was governor of Syria. I'm like, Pilate, it's like Herod, and it's like, so there's all these little details that I just didn't know. But one of I put up on there, there's this picture of the sky and there's this star and it's kind of beaming down at the earth. And it's just this, yeah, it's right up there. And that's kind of had been my conception of the star for a long time. And then I go read scripture, and this was just a few years ago, like within the last decade, that I realized this, maybe a little bit longer than that. But, you got the wise men, they get to Jerusalem and they go ask Herod, what's going on? We saw the star. What is this? And if my conception of there's this star beaming down, everybody in the world would have, everybody on that side of the world would have known what's going on. And what did Herod do? Is like, what are they talking about? I have no idea what's going on here. So it's got to be something far more subtle than that. And so it's something that people who are very intent at looking at the sky would have recognized. And so just recognizing that and looking through and saying, okay, what does scripture say? What doesn't scripture say? Can help at least have a better picture of what's going on and kind of narrow down some of what astronomically, or what some of the astronomical explanations at least work in there. And I think there's probably a few. I mean, I have my ideas and my boss Hugh Ross has his ideas, and they're not the same ideas in terms of which is the best explanation, but yeah, they're both reasonable in my assessment.
So do you have a number of explanations you're going to go through here? Because I want to know.
So again, this is in the context of, this is a phenomena that somebody who is looking carefully at the sky would have seen, not the average, and the average person wouldn't have even known anything was going on. And even
they are wise men, by the way. I mean, they're described that way for a reason. They weren't just your average Joe. They were guys that spend some time thinking and pondering. And what do they ponder? They look up at the stars and in the sky, right? And that's part of their figuring out what reality is all about, right?
So, I mean, as I look at it, two of the, you think, okay, it could be a comet. Well, I mean, again, comets are pretty, most of the time, or again, comets that are of the nature that I'm thinking about, those are pretty noticeable in the sky. Again, without a lot of lights or, light pollution, everybody's going to see those. I think, to me, the two best classes, the one that I think is most likely, that I tend to favor, is some sort of conjunction where Jupiter and Venus and Regulus, something like that, where there's just an unusual, this is a little bit, this is unusual, or it's remarkable, maybe not unusual, but remarkable. And I think that, so there's that one. And so then you got now the star is either Jupiter now in its motion or something like that, or even Mars in its, or Venus in its motion, or and this is the one my boss tends to favor, is that there's a recurrent nova, that there's a star that gets bright and then fades away and then it gets bright again. And again, neither of these are, oh wow, there's this beaming light in the sky. But if you're looking at the sky, you'll know, hey, there's a star that wasn't there before. Oh, there's this conjunction of stars. But I think both of those explanations work well in the context of recognizing that I'm willing to bet, and this is a full attribution to Hugh Ross, because he's the one where I heard this, that the wise men were probably not the descendants of, but the successors of Daniel, who Daniel prophesied, said, so many years after the reconstruction of the temple, this is when it's going to be. So you've got this weird astronomical phenomena that people looking closely at the sky see, and it lines up with the timing of when there's supposed to be the Messiah. And you've got this connection back to Daniel, who's pointing towards the God of Israel, Yahweh. And so it's like, okay, this is what's going on. We're going to go see now this king now that's been born. So that makes a lot of sense to me, regardless of whether you go with the conjunction or the nova explanation.
That I have heard that. I mean, we have to ask ourselves those questions, because the scriptures, they kind of just lay out the facts, and some of those facts are like, well, there's a lot more to this. What's behind it, and how did these wise men know that at such a time as this, right? How would they know that they should be on the lookout in this time frame? Because there are astronomical events that happen all the time, but it's a matter of them lining up with a specific moment in time, right? It's not just that they happen. They're looking for something at a specific time. And that's the conjunction of those two factors coming together to make it like the miraculous. And so it absolutely makes sense that whether they were, I don't think they were biological or the actual lineage of Daniel himself, because he was likely a eunuch, right? Because they were, but there were a bunch of Jews and followers, and the king Nebuchadnezzar kind of elevated them. So there was definitely a cultural impact that these prophets of God had in that part of the world where these guys came from. So that absolutely makes sense that they would have been kind of, wait, we are in that time. He prophesied a certain amount of time that was on. Here we are of that generation. We must keep a lookout. And it was pretty specific. Daniel, it's down to the year Daniel prophesied. And so they're like, all right, looks like we're within that year. Maybe the fudge factor for the last couple of years we've been looking, but they're looking to the sky, looking for events. And then there's another prophecy that I heard another preacher mention, and I don't know if this would contradict the Daniel theory or be overlap with it, but Balaam made a prophecy as well. From that part, like Balaam was not a prophet of Israel, but he was from that region of the world where these
Right.
wise men would have come from. So certainly that culture that they came from were on the lookout.
Yeah.
One of the theories that I just read through honestly this morning real quickly, what you're talking about, the convergence of a couple of the planets alignment, so that there's an unusually bright spot in the sky, right? I guess that is what you're saying.
Well, and it's less than even that there's a bright spot. It's that, the Jupiter and Venus and Regulus, whatever conjunction you're having going on there, they move at different rates across the sky. So you can watch night by night. Ooh, they're getting closer. They're getting closer. Oh, they overlap. So it's
Got it.
or you could have, because you get retrograde motion. Jupiter can make circles around a star. I mean, I don't exactly know what specifically was seen, but we do know these sorts of things happen, and we can look at them and say, okay, yeah, we know when conjunctions happen, because the motions of the heavens are incredibly reliable. And one of the things that I find fascinating is that I live in Southern California here. I think latitude about 32 degrees, which it's remarkably similar to Jerusalem. And so, what the skies that David and Jesus saw are pretty much the same skies we see here today. And we've had the same calendar over that time. And so what we see today is a good indicator of what might have been going on back in the past. And we can calculate very reliably when these things might have happened and what they might have happened. And so, I mean, there's lots of questions about, when was Jesus born and when was this king? And, there's dates that are, 5 to 8 years in flux there, but there's nothing in there that says, there are good explanations that say, given the timing, this would all work out. And so I do think the Bible's describing an actual historical event. And when you think about what the wise men did, not just the three of them, I'm sure the entourage was much larger. This was a significant commitment of their time and resources to go do this, because when they saw the event and when they arrived was 2 years later. They didn't show up at the manger when Jesus was there. They showed up 2 years later. And based on that, that's when Herod decided, we're going to go kill all the kids 2 years and younger. So this was a big commitment to make this venture.
Yeah, that's right. We, in our, traditions where we kind of truncate things and, make a quick impression. You've got the three guys, with their gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and they're around the manger when Jesus is an infant. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get what you're trying to include all these things into one image, but that's not what they were not at a manger. They didn't show up there. It was Jesus was 2 years old at this time when they showed up.
Right.
Yeah. Also, that you were hitting on some of the dating things. It's been fairly reliably established that Jesus was born in 4 BC. That is like 4 years, 4 BC, because the guy who it was a monk some 400 years, like 400 AD. The guy did his math and determined when Jesus was born, and he was off by 4 years. But they already established the dating. Right, we're gonna start the dating.
Yeah.
At this time, and he was wrong, but it had already gotten so entrenched in culture that they just kept it, even though it was about 4 years off. So in reading,
expand on that, because I mean, I have heard that when Herod lived, I mean, there are ambiguities of when these all. There's no doubt that it's in that time period, whether it's 0, 4, whatever. I don't deny that it's reasonable to say, okay, yeah, this was the date, and we now think it's 4 years off. But my understanding is there is some level of academic discussion about when actually all these happened. Because if you know that Jesus was born in 4 BC or 4 AD, then okay, these are the astronomical phenomena. But I know people are talking about conjunctions that may have been in 1 AD, and so it does seem like there's some level of uncertainty still about exactly when all those dates were.
That's true. You have to weigh each expert's expertise, and the guy that I have found personally, the most credible or reliable is Gary Habermas.
Yeah.
Are you familiar? And the guy that's his specialty, and that guy proves that he proves that Jesus was a miracle worker completely outside of biblical reference, right? He's like, here's how your secular historians, the things that the secular historians accept, I will prove it only from what secular historians accept. I'm like, oh, this guy has thought it all the way through, and I listened to a teaching from him on, because his expertise is the reliability of the earliest manuscripts. So he's done the most comprehensive studies on all the views, and so you got to settle somewhere. I guess you don't have to, because Jesus will tell us all exactly. There will be time when we do know, but I tend to, things that I've stayed away from for a long time, after a lot of review, there's certain objective details that come out. I'm okay. I'm going to believe that. I'm at least 51%, right, convinced, right? So I'm going with 4 BC for Jesus's birth. All right. So in my brief research on the different perspectives on the star, have you heard some say it's potentially was a heliacal rising, or heliacal, heliacal.
I've not heard that term. What is that? What's that one? What's that?
I'll just read it. It's only a paragraph or so here. Astrology of the time didn't focus on the stars themselves. Ancient astronomers knew that stars remained fixed in the night sky. Instead, astrology focused on astronomical events such as the last appearance of a particular star before sunrise. In addition, it looked for the conjunctions of stars and planets. One clue is buried in the verse itself, where, quote, "in the east" could also be interpreted as "at the rising." Did Matthew describe a heliacal rising? In other words, there are special stars or whatever, and when you look eastward in their alignment as the sun is coming up or going down, you look for those specific stars and where they are, and that would be a very specific direction to go, right? If they're looking east and there's a particular star that they think this is it or something like that, that they would just basically set their compasses toward that star and start heading in that direction. So that's an interpretation.
But that's kind of interesting, and I may, without at the risk of sounding really stupid right now, my impression has always been that the wise men were further east. So if they're looking to the east when it rises, Jerusalem would be to the west, and so.
Well, maybe they point in that direction and go in the reverse. That's a good right.
Well, and this is what I found, is that these phrases, the sun's in the east, that the star pointed the way. It's like there are these are not necessarily easy to translate sections where it's like, oh, okay, this is exactly what it means. It's like, so what were the wise men doing? They were looking in the skies, trying to figure out where they are determines where things are going to be in the sky too, because that's just the nature of things. I mean, if you're all along the same line of latitude, it's just the time of the day. But if you're further east or further north or further south, things are just going to look different. And so I think all of that, we just got to recognize this may be something we might not have all the data to answer this side of heaven until we get there. And even when we get there, God's going to say, that really is not the main point of this. It was it was announcing.
That is the conclusion of this article that I read. Because I'm just reading one of the interpretations, right? They're not saying this is the one. It went through the ones that you went through as well. But this is, and its conclusion is probably not something we're ever going to know until Jesus tells us himself. Right. But it happened, right? They found him, and that's the thing. It's like they went to Herod, so it wasn't specific enough for them. Like, it wasn't like a hovering star that like moving like some special glow that, you know, like the burning bush, right? There's the burning bush. Well, is this something higher in the atmosphere that just appeared suddenly and guided them specifically? Well, I don't know. Why would it take them? Why would they go to Herod if it was something like that, right? There's that idea is like maybe this was a special star that God put up there. Well, it got them to Israel, I guess, right? They're like, yeah, we're in Israel, and let's ask the king where this new king is or whatever, because obviously they didn't know all the details, right? They didn't know the details. They thought the king might know. They went straight to him, right?
Well, that's one thing. I wonder if, you know, we kind of read that with a Western mindset, and I very much like, ooh, there are dates there now. I can add up numbers and figure out how long the time was, or, you know, things like this where there's indication. Okay, there's an astronomical. What is the astronomical phenomena? That clearly the astronomical phenomena wasn't the main focus of that story, and so there are enough details to say, hey, this is what got it started. But so I wonder, you look at this group of people, and it's like, if my boss Hugh Ross's assessment is correct, that these are the professional and descendants of Daniel, and kind of knew, or at least held Daniel in high regard, knew his teachings, knew about the prophecy, know this is the time. This makes perfect sense. Hey, the king's born. Let's go to Jerusalem and figure out where he is, because they're going to know what's going on. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to, ooh, my GPS I don't have to ask anybody. I could just go straight where I can. It's the star wasn't a GPS. It was a sign of what's going on.
Right.
Go figure out how to.
Now's the time. Let's go. We know generally where to go. Yeah, we know generally where to go. It's going to be in Israel. This is the Messiah for the Jews, right? And that's where they are. And so, okay, the sign happened. Let's get over there. It's not like they were looking at the sky going, which way? Which way? Right? It's like, oh, we know. Let's go. But what's curious is, how did they find Jesus himself? Even after talking to Herod, it's like, it's very interesting. It's like, Jesus was just a kid. Well, maybe the rumors had spread, because Mary, the shepherds, Joseph, they had supernatural encounters with the angels, like angelic beings. Like, so there was probably word of mouth that spread that might have been like, don't tell the king, but do you remember that thing that happened? Right. And then these guys come across and they're kind of spreading the word. We're looking for the Messiah. We're looking for the Messiah. Probably word got around to the subculture, right? Oh, he's over here. This is him. And so all of Jesus's life, there were certain people that were like, we know that's him. We know that's him. And just kind of were from a distance, keeping their eye on what was going on. Even Mary hid those things in her heart. Right. So yeah, it's starting to make sense. It's all coming together.
I wonder too, and I say this as someone who loves discerning and trying to understand and figuring out the way to do things, and getting principles so that I can operate. It's like I am fairly notorious in my wife's family of, when I get something, I rarely read the instructions, because I've got to figure. I don't need somebody else telling me what to do. But I wonder if, because God is inherently relational, that this is now something where people can come in. The intent is, hey, go talk to people, go figure it out, engage, keep going. I'm going to keep telling you as you get closer. You don't have to have the whole story up front.
Right.
So it's like, go to Jerusalem and you're going to figure it out. You don't know where it is, but when you get there, keep solving, kind of like Indiana Jones, if you will. Although that may be a bad example, but where it's like,
I have a different example.
Is part of the fun. So
right. It's consistent with God's character in Scripture. God said to Abraham, what? Go to the place I will show you. Right? You got to step out first, right? You got to believe first. You're like, okay, God's speaking to me. He's telling me to do something. I get the impression that this is the direction I'm supposed to go. And as you go, more detail. It's like you go on a path, or say you're hiking up a mountain trail. You might see, oh, there's the trail. I can see it from here. But there's a whole lot of different stuff in between that and here that you have to go through. And you don't find it until you get started. Right. Yeah. It makes sense. Well, that's like Carrie's saying here. You two are giving me so much to look into, to research.
Cool.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, that's what I remember, to your point about that. I remember reading about, where Moses is in there, and Moses saying, how do I know this? He goes, well, once you've done it all, you're going to worship here.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what I want.
Right.
Give me the sign now, not after we've done it. So,
And people always say, if you had known that you would have to go through all this, would you have done it? Would you have started in the first place? And some people say no, and other people say yeah. And I had a. We're out of time. I don't want to go on a tangent. Jeff, it always goes so fast. It's good to see you, my friend, and I'm glad your daughters weren't freaked out about your friend. Where are we going to the
we had a
cemetery?
good conversation about it. So,
All right, good. Well, that's what I hope to inspire is conversation about my project. All right, love you, brother. I'll see you next time.
see ya.
Bye, everybody. In the stream. Bye, everybody.